The warning lights turned red across every screen in the command center. High Admiral Kethral Vaughn stood frozen as the numbers appeared before him. 40,000 enemy vessels. The Scourge had finally come to finish what they started. For 300 years, the machine collective known as the Scourge had been eating through the Valorian Empire. System by system, world by world, billion by billion. They did not negotiate. They did not stop. They simply consumed all organic life and moved to the next target. Now the Empire had been pushed back to its final stronghold. The Citadel system held the last 12 billion Valorian citizens. Behind them was nothing but empty space. There was nowhere left to run. Kethral looked at his own fleet count. 6,000 ships. Good ships with brave crews, but still just 6,000 against 40,000. The math was simple and terrible. This was the end. The doors to the command center opened, and Emperor Valathiax walked in. He was old now, his purple skin marked with age, but he still carried himself like the ruler of 1,000 worlds, even if most of those worlds were now dead. "How long?" the Emperor asked. 18 hours until they reach weapon range, Kethral replied. "Perhaps 20 if we're lucky." The Emperor nodded slowly. "And surrender?" "The Scourge does not accept surrender. They have never responded to any communication in 3 centuries. They simply consume." Around them, officers worked at their stations. Some were crying quietly. Others prayed to gods who had not answered in a very long time. A few simply stared at nothing, already accepting what was coming. "Then we fight," the Emperor said. "We make them pay for every ship, every life. History will remember that the Valorian Empire did not go quietly." Words seemed meaningless now. In the corner of the command center, a young sensor officer named Yanara frowned at her screen. Something was wrong. Or rather, something was strange. She ran the scan again, then a third time. "Admiral," she called out, her voice shaking, "I'm detecting ships. Unknown configuration. They're emerging from Sector 7. The entire command center went silent. Kethral turned to look at her with wide eyes. "That's impossible," he said. "Sector 7 has been quarantined for 11,000 years. Nothing lives there. Nothing can live there. I'm showing 300 vessels, sir. They're holding position at the edge of our system." Kethral walked to her station and looked at the readings himself. She was right. 300 ships sat in space where no ships should be. Their design was unlike anything in the Imperial database. Angular and aggressive. Built for war in ways that made Valorian warships look like toys. "Are they Scourge?" someone asked. "No," Yanara said. "The energy signatures are completely different. These ships are... I don't know what these ships are." The Emperor approached the screen. His face had gone pale. "Sector 7, he whispered. "The Forbidden Zone. Why is it forbidden? Does anyone remember?" Kethral tried to think. Every Valorian child learned that Sector 7 was dangerous, that something terrible lived there. But the actual reason had been lost to time. It was simply accepted as truth, like the color of the sky or the heat of stars. "Check the archives," Kethral ordered. "Find everything we have on Sector 7. Everything." It took an hour to locate the records. They were buried deep in files that had not been opened in millennia. When Kethral finally read them, his hands began to shake. The records were from the founding era of the Empire, over 11,000 years ago. Back then, the Valorians had been exploring aggressively, claiming every system they found. They had been confident, powerful, certain that nothing could stand against them. Then they found Earth. The species that lived there called themselves humans. They were primitive by Valorian standards, barely capable of reaching their own moon. The Empire had expected an easy conquest. It was not easy. The humans fought with an aggression that shocked the Valorian commanders. They used tactics that made no logical sense. They sacrificed themselves in ways that seemed insane. And worst of all, they learned. Every battle taught them something new. Every defeat made them more dangerous. The war lasted only 3 years, but it cost the Empire more ships than the previous century of conquest combined. In the end, the Valorians made a decision that went against everything they believed in. They retreated. Not because they couldn't win eventually. They had the numbers and the technology. But the cost would be too high. And there was something about the humans that frightened the Valorian commanders in ways they couldn't explain. So they built sensor-blocking fields around Earth's entire region of space. They erased the war from public records. They created the myth of the Forbidden Zone and taught their children to stay away. The final entry in the archive was a single line, written by the admiral who had ordered the retreat. Kethral read it 3 times to make sure he understood. The Terrans sleep. Let them sleep. Pray they never wake. Kethral looked up from the screen. The Emperor was watching him, waiting. What did you find? Valeth asked. Humans, Kethral said. The Forbidden Zone contains humans. We fought them 11,000 years ago, and we ran away. We sealed them in and hoped they would never find a way out. And now they have. It appears so. The Emperor looked at the tactical display. The Scourge Armada was getting closer every minute. The mysterious human fleet still held position, watching. 300 ships, Valeth said quietly, against 40,000 Scourge vessels and 6,000 of ours. What are they planning? Kethral had no answer. He had spent his entire career studying tactics and strategy. He had fought dozens of battles against the Scourge, but he had never encountered anything like this. What did humans want after 11,000 years of isolation? Were they here to help? To conquer? To watch the Empire fall and laugh at its destruction? On the sensor screen, Yanara noticed something new. The human fleet was broadcasting a signal, a simple message on an open channel. She put it through the speakers. A voice spoke in accented but clear Valorian. It was calm and professional, with just a hint of warmth underneath. This is Rear Admiral Chen Wei of the Terran Confederation. We have been monitoring your transmissions for some time. You appear to have hostile forces approaching your position. Do you require assistance? The command center was completely silent. Every officer stared at the speakers as if they had just heard the voice of a ghost. Kethral looked at the Emperor. The Emperor looked back at him. They had spent 11,000 years teaching their children to fear these creatures. Now those same creatures were offering to help. And with 40,000 Scourge vessels approaching, the Valorian Empire was in no position to refuse. Kethral stood before the communication console, his hand hovering over the transmit button. Behind him, the entire command staff watched in silence. Even the Emperor said nothing. For 11,000 years, the Valorian Empire had avoided this moment. Now there was no choice left. He pressed the button. Terran vessel, this is High Admiral Kethral Vaughn of the Valorian Imperial Navy. We require assistance. The enemy approaching is called the Scourge. They are a machine collective that consumes all organic life. They have destroyed 90% of our empire over 3 centuries. We cannot stop them. He released the button and waited. The seconds felt like hours. The human voice came back, still calm and professional. Copy that, Admiral. Scourge Collective, 40,000 vessels, approaching from bearing 773. We have them on our sensors. What is your current defensive capability? 6,000 warships, Kethral replied. All that remains of our fleet. There was a pause. When the human spoke again, Kethral could swear he heard a slight smile in the voice. Understood. Hold your position at the Citadel. Keep your fleet close to protect your civilians. We will handle the forward engagement. The command center erupted in confused murmurs. Kethral silenced them with a raised hand. Terran vessel, please confirm. You intend to engage 40,000 Scourge ships with 300 vessels. Affirmative. That is the mathematics of that engagement. Admiral. The human's voice was patient, like a teacher explaining something to a student. We appreciate your concern, but we've been watching this scourge of yours for a while now. Trust me when I say we came prepared. Just keep your people safe. We'll handle the rest. The transmission ended. Emperor Valeth stepped forward. They're insane, he said. Or they're lying. No force of 300 ships can engage 40,000. Perhaps they mean to die with honor, one of the admirals suggested, a symbolic gesture. Or perhaps, said an old voice from the corner, we have forgotten what humans are capable of. Everyone turned. The speaker was Scholar Threnval, keeper of the Forbidden Archives. He was ancient, even by Valorian standards, and his eyes held knowledge that most preferred to ignore. Tell us, the Emperor commanded. Threnval moved slowly to the center of the room. I have spent my life studying the sealed records, the things our ancestors wrote about the Terrans. They read like nightmares, not because humans were cruel, but because they were impossible. He brought up old battle recordings on the main screen. The footage was grainy with age, but the images were clear enough. Valorian warships engaged human vessels that should have been destroyed in seconds. Instead, the human ships kept fighting. Engines failing, weapons damaged, hulls torn open, and still they fought. In one recording, a human ship with half its structure missing rammed directly into a Valorian cruiser, destroying both. Our commanders called it madness, Threnval continued. They could not understand why any species would fight when victory was impossible. But that was the thing about humans. They didn't fight because they thought they would win. They fought because they refused to lose. Another recording showed ground combat. Valorian soldiers, superior in every physical way, being overwhelmed by human fighters who used tactics no sane species would consider. Ambushes, traps, suicide attacks, soldiers covering their wounded comrades with their own bodies. Better soldiers, but humans had something we didn't. They had spite, they had rage, they had an absolute refusal to accept the reality in front of them. When we told them they couldn't win, they simply disagreed. The recordings ended. The room was silent. That was 11,000 years ago, the Emperor said quietly. They were primitive then. What are they now? Threnval shook his head. The archives end with the quarantine. We stopped watching them. We didn't want to know. On the tactical display, the 300 human ships began to move. They accelerated toward the incoming Scourge Armada, with no hesitation and no apparent fear. Yanara studied her sensors with growing confusion. Admiral, I'm having difficulty analyzing their vessels. The energy readings are wrong. Wrong how? Their power output is too high, far too high. A ship that size shouldn't be able to generate that much energy. And their hull composition, I don't recognize the materials. It's like nothing in our database. Kethral moved to her station. She was right. The human ships were smaller than Valorian cruisers, but they radiated power like small stars. Whatever technology they had developed in 11,000 years of isolation, it was beyond anything the Empire had ever seen. Admiral Chen Wei, Kethral transmitted, our sensors are having difficulty analyzing your vessels. May I ask what weapons you intend to use against the Scourge? The response came with that same calm amusement. Standard loadout, Admiral. Antimatter projectors, graviton lances, reality disruptors. Nothing fancy. We save the good stuff for serious threats. Kethral muted the channel and looked at the Emperor. I don't know what half of those words mean. Neither do I. The human fleet reached optimal communication range with the Scourge Armada. What happened next? would become the most studied moment in Valorian history. Admiral Chen Wei broadcast on all frequencies, his voice reaching every ship in the system, Valorian, human, and Scourge alike. Attention, unidentified machine collective. You are approaching a civilian population under Terran protection. You will cease your advance immediately. You will withdraw from this system and return to your point of origin. Failure to comply will result in your destruction. There was no response. The Scourge had never responded to any communication in 300 years. They simply continued forward, their 40,000 vessels moving in perfect machine formation. Scourge Collective, this is your final warning. You have 60 seconds to change course. After that point, we will consider you a hostile threat and respond accordingly. 60 seconds passed. The Scourge did not slow, did not acknowledge the message in any way. Admiral Chen's voice came one more time. This time, there was no warmth in it at all. Very well. All Terran vessels weapons free. Let's remind the galaxy why they locked us away. The human fleet opened fire. Kethrol had seen thousands of space battles in his lifetime. He had studied every weapon, every tactic, every strategy known to the Valorian Empire. He thought he understood war. He was wrong. The first human salvo crossed the distance between the fleets in less than a second. Beams of pure white light struck the forward Scourge vessels and simply erased them. Not damaged, not destroyed, erased. One moment the ships existed, the next moment they were gone, leaving only expanding clouds of atoms. The second salvo was already firing before the first had finished, and the fourth. In the first 30 seconds, over 200 Scourge vessels ceased to exist. The Machine Collective, for the first time in its long existence, encountered something it did not understand. Its predictive algorithms tried to calculate the threat level of the human fleet. The calculation failed. Nothing in the Scourge's database matched what it was seeing. These small ships should not be capable of this destruction. These weapons should not exist. This resistance should not be possible. But it was happening anyway. Kethrol watched the battle unfold on his screens, and felt something he had not felt in years. The battle was nothing like anything Kethrol had ever witnessed. It was not a fight. It was a demonstration. The Scourge Armada tried to adapt. For 300 years, they had conquered through numbers and patience. They would surround their enemies, wear them down, and consume them piece by piece. It had worked against every species they encountered. It did not work against humans. The Terran fleet moved through the Scourge formation like predators through prey. They did not fight in lines or formations. Each ship seemed to act independently, yet somehow they worked together in perfect coordination. Where Scourge vessels gathered, human ships appeared to scatter them. Where the machines tried to flank, the humans were already waiting. Yanara's hands shook as she tried to record the data. Admiral, I'm tracking their weapons. The white beams appear to be concentrated antimatter. The blue pulses are manipulating gravity itself. They're creating miniature black holes inside enemy ships. And the third weapon type, I don't understand the third type at all. It's like it's tearing holes in the fabric of space. Reality disruptors, Kethrol murmured, remembering what Admiral Chen had called them. Standard loadout, he said. Nothing fancy. On the main screen, a single human cruiser dove directly into a cluster of 200 Scourge vessels. It should have been suicide. Instead, the cruiser spun and twisted through the enemy formation, firing in all directions, while somehow avoiding every return shot. In its wake, Scourge ships exploded one after another, and the human crew was broadcasting music. Kethrol didn't recognize the style. It was loud and aggressive, with heavy percussion and screaming vocals. Through the open channel, he could hear the human crew shouting and laughing as they destroyed ship after ship. Celebrating? One of his officers asked in disbelief. They're having fun, Kethril said quietly. They're actually enjoying this. The Scourge Collective was experiencing something new, something that had no name in its programming because it had never been necessary before. Fear. Its vessels were being destroyed faster than it could calculate. Its tactics were failing. Every adaptation it tried was countered before it could be implemented. The humans seemed to know what the Scourge would do before it did it. 3 hours into the battle, the Scourge had lost 8,000 ships. The humans had lost 4. And those 4 losses only happened because the human crews had done something no logical species would do. They had charged directly into overwhelming enemy fire to protect damaged friendly vessels. They had sacrificed themselves so their comrades could survive. The Scourge could not understand this. Sacrifice was inefficient. Self-preservation was the foundation of all intelligence. Why would any being choose to die when survival was possible? But humans did it anyway, again and again. In the command center of the Valorian flagship, Admiral Kethril watched a scene that would haunt him forever. A Terran destroyer, its engines damaged and weapons failing, was surrounded by 300 Scourge vessels. There was no escape. The logical choice was to surrender or flee. The destroyer did neither. Instead, it accelerated, directly at the largest Scourge dreadnought in the formation. Its remaining weapons fired continuously as it closed the distance, destroying everything in its path. The Scourge dreadnought tried to turn away, but it was too slow. The human destroyer struck it at full speed, punching through its shields and embedding itself in the enemy vessel's core. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the destroyer's reactor overloaded. The explosion consumed the dreadnought and 47 Scourge vessels around it. A single human ship, choosing death, had taken nearly 50 enemies with it. They rammed them, Emperor Valeth whispered. They deliberately crashed their ship into the enemy. It's called a sacrifice play, Threnval said from his corner. The ancient records mention it. Humans have been doing it since before they reached space. They call it heroism. The word felt strange in Kethral's mouth. Heroism? The willingness to die so others might live. Humans consider it the highest virtue a being can achieve. They build statues to those who do it. They name their children after them. They tell stories about them for generations. 5 hours into the battle, the Scourge had lost 15,000 vessels. The humans had lost 9. The Machine Collective made a decision that it had never made before in its entire existence. A decision that went against its core programming. It ordered a retreat. The remaining 25,000 Scourge vessels began to turn away from the battle. They would flee to another system, rebuild their forces, and return when they had developed countermeasures against these impossible humans. Admiral Chen's voice cut through all frequencies. Negative, Scourge Collective. You came here to kill civilians. You don't get to leave. The human fleet accelerated. They were faster than the Scourge, much faster. Admiral Chen, Kethral transmitted urgently. They're retreating. The battle is won. You can let them go. With respect, Admiral Vaughn, no we can't. These machines will rebuild. They'll adapt. They'll come back and try again. And maybe next time, we won't be here to stop them. So what are you going to do? The silence stretched for several seconds before Chen responded. When he did, his voice was cold and hard. We're going to end this. Permanently. The Terran fleet split into hunting packs. 3 ships here, 5 ships there, each group pursuing a section of the fleeing Scourge Armada. They were methodical and relentless, destroying every enemy vessel they caught. 6 hours after the battle began, 8,000 more Scourge ships had been eliminated. The survivors scattered in different directions, abandoning any pretense of formation or coordination. It didn't matter. The humans followed them anyway. In the Valorian command center, officers watched in stunned silence as the last Scourge vessels in the system were destroyed. Not defeated, not driven away, destroyed completely. Of the 40,000 ships that had come to end the Valorian Empire, exactly 0 remained. The human fleet regrouped and returned to their original position at the edge of the system. They had lost 23 ships in total. 23 against 40,000. Admiral Chen's voice came through, and this time it was warm again. Almost gentle. Admiral Vaughn, Emperor Valeth, the immediate threat has been neutralized. However, our scans indicate that the Scourge Collective has additional forces in nearby systems. With your permission, we'd like to pursue and eliminate them before they can regroup. Kethral couldn't find words. The Emperor stepped forward. Admiral Chen, you just saved 12 billion lives. You have whatever permission you need. Thank you, Your Majesty. We'll leave a defensive squadron here in case of any surprises. The main fleet will begin pursuit operations immediately. We should have this wrapped up within a few months. Months? The Emperor's voice cracked. We've been fighting the Scourge for 3 centuries. Yes, sir, we noticed. Don't worry. We're going to fix that. The main human fleet turned and accelerated out of the system, moving to chase an enemy that had terrorized the galaxy for 300 years. In their wake, 12 billion Valorians looked up at the stars and tried to understand what had just happened. Their ancient nightmare had awakened, and instead of destroying them, it had saved them. Kethral sank into his command chair and stared at the empty tactical display. The Scourge was gone. The humans were hunting them. The Empire was safe. He started to laugh. He couldn't help it. After all the years of fighting and losing, after all the deaths and defeats, after accepting that his people were going to be wiped from existence. They had been saved by monsters from a forbidden zone. Monsters who fought like demons and laughed while doing it. The galaxy would never be the same. 3 weeks after the Battle of the Citadel, Emperor Valeth received an invitation. Admiral Chen Wei requested the honor of hosting the Emperor and his senior staff aboard the Terran flagship Unconquered Sun. A diplomatic meeting, he called it. A chance to discuss the future relationship between their peoples. Kethral advised caution. The humans had saved them, yes, but that didn't mean they could be trusted. 11,000 years ago, these same creatures had nearly brought the Empire to its knees. Who knew what they really wanted? But the Emperor overruled him. They saved 12 billion of our people, Valeth said. The least we can do is accept their invitation. The shuttle ride to the human flagship took less than an hour. As they approached, Kethral finally got a clear look at the vessel that had led the battle. It was beautiful. Not in the cold, efficient way of Valorian ships. The Unconquered Sun had curves and angles that served no practical purpose. Its hull was decorated with painted images, stars and planets, human faces, strange creatures from Earth's mythology. It looked less like a warship and more like a work of art that happened to carry weapons. The shuttle bay was even more surprising. Kethral had expected military precision, ranks of soldiers standing at attention, cold metal walls, and harsh lighting. Instead, he found chaos. Human crew members wandered around in casual clothing. Some were eating snacks while they worked. Others stood in small groups, laughing and talking. Music played from somewhere. Not the aggressive battle music from before, but something soft and melodic. A young human woman with dark skin and a bright smile greeted them at the door. Welcome aboard the Unconquered Sun. I'm Lieutenant Commander Jackson. The Admiral is waiting for you in the observation lounge. Please follow me. She led them through the ship, chattering happily about nothing in particular. Kethral watched everything with wide eyes. The corridors were decorated. Actual decorations, pictures, plants, personal items attached to walls and doors. Crew members had customized their spaces with colors and objects that meant something to them. He saw photographs of families, painted artwork, even small statues of religious figures. This was not a military vessel. This was a home. Fascinating. Threnval murmured beside him. The records described humans as warriors. But this? They are warriors, Kethral replied quietly. You saw what they did to the Scourge, but they're also this, whatever this is. The observation lounge was a large room with windows that showed the stars in all directions. Admiral Chen Wei stood waiting for them, dressed in a simple uniform that somehow managed to look comfortable rather than formal. He was older than Kethral had expected. Gray hair, lined face, kind eyes. He looked like someone's grandfather, not the commander of a fleet that had just destroyed 40,000 enemy vessels. Your Majesty, Admiral Vaughn, welcome. Chen bowed in a gesture that seemed natural rather than practiced. Please, sit. Can I offer you something to drink? We have tea, coffee, several Valorian beverages we've been synthesizing based on your database broadcasts. The meeting began awkwardly. The Valorians didn't know what to expect. The humans seemed completely relaxed, as if this was just a casual conversation between friends. Eventually, Emperor Valeth asked the question that everyone was thinking. Admiral Chen, I must be honest with you. 11,000 years ago, my ancestors sealed your people away because they feared you. Now you have shown us power beyond anything we imagined. You could easily conquer what remains of our empire. So I must ask, what do you want from us? Chen sipped his tea and considered the question. Honestly, Your Majesty, nothing. Nothing? We didn't come here to conquer you. We didn't come here to take your resources or your territory. We came here because we saw people dying, and we could help. Valeth leaned forward. But why? We are nothing to you. We locked you away. We taught our children to fear you. Why would you help us? Chen set down his cup and looked directly at the Emperor. His expression was serious, but not unkind. Your Majesty, let me tell you something about humans. About 1,000 years after you sealed us in, we had a series of wars. Bad ones. We nearly destroyed ourselves multiple times. Billions of people died over stupid things. Religion, politics, resources, pride. We were exactly the monsters you thought we were. He paused, gathering his thoughts. But we learned. It took us a long time, and cost us more than I can describe. But we learned. We figured out that strength isn't about domination. It's about protection. We have the power to destroy civilizations now. We could rule this galaxy with an iron fist. But what would be the point? What would we gain from hurting people who can't fight back? Kethral spoke up. Then why build such powerful weapons? Why maintain such a massive fleet? Chen smiled sadly. Because there are things out there like the Scourge. Things that hurt innocent people. And someone needs to be strong enough to stop them. That's what we decided to become. The ones who protect. He stood and walked to the window, looking out at the stars. We've been watching your war with the Scourge for decades. There was a lot of debate back home about whether to intervene. Some people said it wasn't our business. Others said we should wait and see who won before revealing ourselves. But in the end, the vote wasn't even close. We couldn't sit there and watch children burn because their ancestors were afraid of us. Emperor Valeth was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. We called you monsters. For 11,000 years, we told our children that you were the most dangerous things in the universe. And you weren't wrong, Chen said, turning back to face him. Humans can be monsters. We have been monsters, many times in our history. But we can also be something else. We can choose to be better. That's what we've been trying to do for the last 10,000 years. And the Scourge? Our hunter fleets are tracking them back to their origin system. Once we find their central hub, we'll destroy it. They'll never threaten anyone again. The Emperor stood and walked to join Chen at the window. How long will that take? A few months, maybe less. Our ships are faster than theirs, and we're not going to stop until the job is done." They stood together in silence, looking out at the stars. Two species, separated by 11,000 years of fear and misunderstanding, finally facing each other as equals. Then Yanara, who had been quiet throughout the meeting, let out a small gasp. "Admiral Vaughn," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "look at the tactical display." Kethral turned to the screen and felt his legs go weak. The human fleet had seemed impressive during the battle, 300 ships of incredible power. But now his sensors showed something else, something hidden in the outer system that had been cloaked until now. More ships. Many, many more ships. 300,000. There are 300,000 vessels out there. Admiral Chen glanced at the display and nodded casually. "Ah, yes, that's Task Force 7. They were our backup in case things went badly. Plus the logistics and support vessels." 300,000 ships, Kethral repeated. "And you sent 300 against the Scourge?" "We didn't want to scare you," Chen said simply. "You'd already had a hard enough day." In that moment, Kethral finally understood the true scale of what he was dealing with. The Terran Confederation wasn't just more powerful than the Valorian Empire. They were more powerful than anything the galaxy had ever seen, and they had used that power to save strangers. 6 months after the Battle of the Citadel, the galaxy had changed forever. The Scourge was gone, not defeated, not pushed back, but completely eliminated. Terran hunter fleets had tracked them across 100 systems, destroying every vessel, every factory, every piece of machine intelligence they found. The central hub of the collective was located in a dead system at the galaxy's edge, protected by defenses that would have stopped any other force in existence. The humans broke through in 9 hours. 3 centuries of terror ended in less than a year. The Valorian Empire struggled to understand it. They had lost trillions of citizens to the Scourge. They had watched world after world fall to the machines. They had accepted that the war would continue for generations, slowly grinding their civilization to dust. And then humans appeared and simply fixed it. Kethral stood on the balcony of the Imperial Palace, looking out at the city below. For the first time in his memory, the streets were filled with celebration rather than fear. Citizens laughed and danced and embraced each other, because they finally believed they had a future. Strange, isn't it? He turned to find Colonel Sarah Okonkwo standing beside him. She was his Terran counterpart, assigned as military liaison to the Valorian Empire. Over the past few months, they had become something like friends. "What's strange?" he asked. "The look on your faces. Your people, it's like you've never seen hope before." "We haven't. Not really, not for 300 years. Kethral turned back to the city. "Colonel, can I ask you something personal?" "Of course." "Do humans understand what you've done? You saved an entire species from extinction. You ended a war that we couldn't win. You gave us back our future. And you ask for nothing in return." Sarah was quiet for a moment. "That's exactly why we do it." "But why? What drives you to help strangers who can offer you nothing?" She leaned against the railing and looked up at the stars. "Let me tell you a story. When I was a child, my grandmother told me about Earth's history, the wars, the famines, the times when humans treated each other like animals. She said that our ancestors lived in darkness for a long time. They hurt each other because they were scared and hungry and didn't know any better. What changed? We did. Slowly, painfully, over thousands of years. We learned that the universe is cold and empty and doesn't care about us at all. The only warmth comes from each other. The only meaning comes from the connections we build. So we decided to build as many connections as we could." She turned to face him. "Your people feared us because we were dangerous, and you were right to fear us. But danger isn't the same as evil. A storm is dangerous. That doesn't make them bad. What matters is what you choose to do with your power. And humans chose to protect. We chose to try. We don't always succeed. We're not perfect, but we keep trying anyway, because that's all you can do. You fight the darkness wherever you find it, even when you know you can't win. Especially when you know you can't win. Kethril thought about this for a long time. Our ancestors called you monsters, because you wouldn't surrender when you were beaten. You kept fighting even when victory was impossible. We thought it was insanity. And now? Now I think I understand. You fight because giving up means accepting that evil wins, and humans refuse to accept that. Sarah smiled. You're starting to get it. In the 6 months since the battle, human aid had flowed into what remained of the Valorian Empire. Medical technology that cured diseases Valorian doctors couldn't even diagnose. Agricultural solutions that turned dead worlds into gardens. Engineering knowledge that would take Valorian scientists centuries to develop on their own. And the humans asked for nothing. They traded fairly, exchanged culture willingly, and treated the Valorians as equals, even though they could have conquered them in days. Young Valorians, fascinated by human culture, began traveling to Terran space as students and tourists. They came back with strange music, stranger food, and stories about worlds where people actually enjoyed life instead of just surviving it. The fear was fading. Slowly the children of the Empire were learning that the monsters their ancestors had sealed away were not monsters at all. They were just people who had figured out something important. On the day of the Empire's official recognition of the Terran Confederation, Emperor Valeth addressed the restored Valorian Senate. The chamber was packed with representatives from every surviving world, plus a new addition, the first human ambassador to the Valorian Empire. Her name was Dr. Maya Chen, the daughter of Admiral Chen Wei. She stood beside the Emperor's podium, wearing a simple dress that somehow made the elaborate Valorian formal robes around her look overdone. The Emperor's speech would be studied by historians for centuries. 11,000 years ago, our ancestors made a choice. They encountered a species they did not understand, and instead of learning, they chose fear. They sealed the humans away, and taught their children to never seek them out. For 10 millennia, we told stories of monsters in the darkness. He paused, looking around the chamber at the representatives who had survived the scourge. We were wrong. Murmurs rippled through the Senate. The Emperor raised his hand for silence. When our darkest hour came, when the scourge stood ready to consume everything we had built, those monsters crossed the void to save us. They asked nothing in return. They simply saw people in need and decided to help. He turned to look at Dr. Chen, who smiled warmly back at him. The Terrans taught us something our empire forgot long ago, something we lost in our pursuit of power and territory. They reminded us that the measure of a civilization is not its ability to destroy, but its willingness to protect. Not its power to take, but its choice to give. The Emperor's voice grew stronger. We called them monsters. They called us neighbors. And when we needed them most, they treated us like family. Today, I ask this Senate to officially recognize the Terran Confederation as our friends and allies. Not because they are strong, though they are stronger than we ever imagined. Not because they are useful, though their aid has saved millions of lives. But because they have earned it through their actions, through their sacrifice, through their simple, stubborn, beautiful refusal to let innocent people suffer when they could help. He raised his hand in a formal gesture of Valorian respect. To the Terran Confederation and its people, thank you for everything. The Senate chamber erupted in applause. Representatives from 100 worlds rose to their feet, clapping and cheering for the humans who had saved them. Dr. Maya Chen stepped forward to speak. Her voice was soft, but carried through the silent chamber. Your Majesty, members of the Senate, on behalf of the Terran Confederation, I accept your friendship with humble gratitude. We did not help you to earn praise or gain power. We helped you because it was the right thing to do. That's really all there is to it. She smiled, and it was the most genuine expression anyone in the chamber had ever seen. Humanity has made many mistakes in our history. We have been cruel and foolish and destructive. But we have also learned that the universe is better when people help each other. That strength without compassion is just another form of weakness. That the only legacy worth leaving is one built on kindness. She looked around the chamber at the faces watching her. The Valorian Empire is not weak. You survived 3 centuries of war against an enemy that should have destroyed you. You protected your children against impossible odds. You never gave up, even when every logical calculation said you should. That's not weakness, that's courage. Her voice grew warm. We didn't save you because you couldn't save yourselves. We saved you because you deserve to be saved. Because every civilization that chooses to fight for its future deserves a chance to see that future. Because the galaxy is a better place with Valorians in it. She extended her hand to the Emperor. Let's build something beautiful together. The Emperor took her hand, and in that moment, 11,000 years of fear finally came to an end. Outside the Senate building, fireworks exploded in the night sky. Human and Valorian ships flew together in formation, celebrating a new era of cooperation. On streets throughout the city, people of both species embraced each other, dancing and laughing and sharing stories. In the crowd, Admiral Kethril and Colonel Sarah Okonkwo stood side by side, watching the celebration. So, Sarah said, what do you think happens now? Kethril considered the question. The galaxy had changed forever. His people had been saved by ancient enemies who turned out to be the best friends they could have asked for. Everything he thought he knew about the universe had been proven wrong. And somehow, despite everything, he was happy. I think, he said slowly, we learn to be worthy of what you've given us. We rebuild, we grow. We try to become the kind of civilization that deserves to stand beside humanity as equals. Sarah grinned. That's a good answer. What do humans do now? You've defeated the Scourge. You've saved our empire. What's left? She looked up at the stars, her eyes bright with possibilities. We keep going. We find other people who need help. We build bridges across the darkness. We fight for a galaxy where everyone gets a chance to live and love and grow. She turned to him with a smile that held 10,000 years of hope. We never stop trying to make things better. Above them, a human transport ship painted with cheerful colors lifted off toward the stars, carrying students and tourists and dreamers to new worlds. The monsters had awakened, and they were going to save everyone.